let's talk about Ranger Suarez on the contractual side of things, the nerdier side of things, that spectrum, and ask the question, what does Ranger Suarez's next contract look like? Because as I said to Andrew right before the break, I think 6 weeks ago, like late June, as we were trending into the All-Star break where we were having the conversation of, man, if Ranger would have pitched in April, he would have been an All-Star. If Ranger would have pitched in April, he'd be in the conversation for Cy Young candidacy. 6 weeks ago or so, we would have had a conversation about Ranger Suarez getting paid, like big time paid. And now all of a sudden, we're having a conversation about, is that number coming down? And how much is that number coming down over the next couple of weeks? And so I was reading a lot of tweets on social media about, and even in a group chat that I'm in, where a lot of people were saying, I think Ranger probably is going to walk, and he's going to sign somewhere else because of his struggles over the last couple of weeks. And I almost feel inversely about that. And I'm not trying to take like a contrarian take here. This is just almost how I feel from a monetary standpoint, knowing what the Phillies' like budgetary availability is going to be next year and who they're going to kind of target in the offseason, knowing that Kyle Schwarber needs to get paid, trying to figure out what JT Realmuto is going to get, trying to figure out what the arbitration numbers are going to look like for guys like Alec Boehm and Jesus Luzardo and all of those things taken into account. Andrew, I almost feel that the number coming down is more beneficial to the Phillies. Now, I will say this. I have held steadfast for pretty much the entirety of the season that I think that Ranger Suarez is going to walk this offseason. I still think he's going to get a larger deal than what the Phillies are willing to pay. And even with his struggles, I do still think there is a team, whether it be a team like the Baltimore Orioles who need pitching, a team like maybe the Boston Red Sox who need pitching. I still think that there is a team out there that is going to be willing to spend money to bring in a Ranger Suarez on a deal that is more than what the Phillies are willing to spend. But I also think that if that number is to come down from X to 75% of X, I think that's more beneficial to the Phillies because they may find themselves more willing to be in that. Like, if I'm just going to throw out a number that's like a 17 or 18 a year as opposed to a 25 a year.
Yeah. It really all depends. So obviously we have a lot of season left. We have a whole playoff run to go through. This conversation can change in the next 2 months.
And I think it's going to.
Especially if he starts to ball out, if he plays well in the playoffs, that money can either rise or fall even more so than what it is currently in its state. It all depends if we're looking at it currently right now in this situation. If tomorrow was free agency and whatnot, it would all really depend on what the Phillies are looking to give him as a role because they have so many prospects coming up, starting pitchers, other guys that are going to be here. Are they going to look at him as a starter, or are they going to look at him more of like a bullpen? Like, what is his role going to become?
Well, I think he and Scott Boras are going to push that he's going to continue to be a starting pitcher.
Exactly.
Because obviously they get paid substantially more.
Of course. So, but if the Phillies don't value him there and say, hey, look, Ranger, we know how you are, your tale of 2 seasons, could somewhere else be like, hey, we'll take you as a starter for the money that you want? It really all comes down to that.
So I think there are 3 certainties surrounding Ranger Suarez. The first certainty is the first 2.5, 3 months of the year, Ranger Suarez is going to pitch really, really well. I also think the certainty of Ranger Suarez being a very utilizable weapon in the postseason, as you brought up, as a starter or as a bullpen guy, because A, he's left-handed, B, he's confident in getting outs in high-leverage spots, and C, we've seen him do it before, is also true. The inverse is, I think the third truth is that he has faltered down the stretch in the regular season each of the last 3 years by either injury or fatigue. That has started to set in. So it's an interesting question. So the question that I pose with Ranger Suarez next year is would the Phillies be willing to offer Ranger the qualifying offer? Now, this is where we really nerd out, because what the qualifying offer is, for maybe those that maybe don't know what the QO is you take the mean salary on an average annual basis of the top 125 players. So the number changes each and every year, and it tends to go up more times than not. The average, the mean salary of the top 125 players heading into the 2026 offseason, without obviously understanding that certain guys are going to get paid, but you look at it from this year's number, is a little over $21 million. So effectively what the qualifying offer is a 1 year, 21.6, I think it's $21.6 million deal. And what that does is it puts a contract in front of the player. It allows you to continue to negotiate with the team that you played for last year on a long-term deal, but you have an offer in place. And it also allows some financial flex or some contractual flexibility for that team. So my question is, if I were to ask you point blank, is Ranger Suarez right this moment, if you were to offer him a multi-year deal, is he worth almost $22 million a season?
I don't think so.
I would tend to agree, but I'm going to give you three names that signed last year for multiple season offers.
Sure.
Do you believe that Ranger Suarez is greater than, equal to, or less than these three players? Sean Manaea.
Equal.
I tend to agree. I like Manaea more than most. I think when they're at their peaks, I would take Ranger.
Yeah.
When they're at their 50%, I think they're probably about equal.
So put that in context. If we're talking about first half Ranger, seeing how he's been every year so far, I take him over
Ranger. For
everybody.
Sure.
I take him over everybody. But having to add in that second half is where things are going to start to fall.
So the reason I bring up these guys is Sean Manaea got 3 for 75 last season. Greater than, equal to, or less than Luis Severino. I think he's better than
I think
Severino.
He's better, yeah. I think
Severino got 3 for 67.
He's also on a back end of a career.
Yes, much older. I shouldn't say sizably older, but older than Ranger.
Yeah.
Last one, Yusei Kikuchi.
I would say probably maybe equal.
So Kikuchi this year has pitched pretty well. 6-7, but that's more because the Angels aren't very good.
Yeah.
3.37 ERA. Whip's kind of high. He's about 1.4, but he's at about a strikeout per inning pitched. He was an all-star this year for them and has now been a 2-time all-star. 146 strikeouts and 139 innings. I think when he's on, he's really, really good.
Yeah.
He disrupts timing. I would say at their peaks, I would take Ranger, but on their mean, I would take Kikuchi. With that being said, Yusei Kikuchi got 3 for just under 64, which actually, I don't know why. Again, I go back to I don't know why he signed with the Angels.
Yeah.
But I think he could have gotten a little bit more than what
money.
He got.
Yeah.
But anyway, I give you those three numbers because they're somewhere between $21 and $25 million a season.
Yeah.
Which I think heading into the year is where I would have placed Ranger Suarez to get.
Yeah.
The qualifying offer being $21 million or a little bit over $21 million, I still think Ranger probably gets somewhere in that range of 20 to 25 a year like these three guys got. So if I offer him the qualifying offer, one of three outcomes can happen. First, he accepts it. I don't think he's going to. I think Boris will do everything he can to say, do not accept the qualifying offer. You can get a long-term deal. But if he accepts the qualifying offer, he's back on a 1 year, 21-point-something million deal, right? Option 2, he declines the qualifying offer, signs a long-term deal with the Phillies. I don't think if I were to say likely scenario, I would put that at 2. I would put he accepts it at 3, meaning least likely. Most likely, I believe, he declines and signs elsewhere. Now, if that happens, he declines and signs elsewhere, the Phillies in turn, if they offer him the QO, will get a compensatory pick back in exchange.
Okay.
Now, the compensatory picks with the qualifying offer vary vastly, and this is where like we're really getting into the weeds. They vary vastly between teams that are above and below the tax threshold. For the Phillies, who are above the tax threshold, the pick would be in the 4th round of next year's draft. Because they're over the tax threshold, they would get that pick within the 4th round. Now, if the Phillies weren't over the tax threshold, if they were a revenue-sharing recipient, like those bottom feeder spending teams are, it would be the team's 3rd highest selection and the 4th round pick. But because the Phillies are willing to spend money, they have an ownership group who spends, the Phillies would get the team's 4th round or 4th highest selection. With that being said, it's going to be a 4th round pick more than likely. It's not like earth-shattering, but extending the QO would give them something instead of Ranger walking for nothing.
Yeah.
I have maintained, I think the likeliest scenario all season long is that Ranger walks in free agency and you just deal with the consequences.
I think that's most likely the outcome as well.
But knowing that those 3 guys who I think are in the ballpark of Ranger Suarez, some on the higher end, some on the lower end. If they're in that ballpark of Ranger Suarez, is it a fair assumption to say that Ranger might get 3 for 75-ish next offseason?
I mean, if you're comparing it to those other 3 guys and seeing what they have gotten, I don't think so. I think he kind of is in that ballpark of that amount of money.
Right.
I don't think he gets any more than 75.
So I actually could see a scenario where he gets a little bit more. But assuming he doesn't, like you said, in that range, that's about 20 to 25 a year. So if he's going to decline the QO anyway, which I think he would if he expects to get about $75 million a year, I don't see the harm in offering it. I think the worst case scenario for the Phillies is they extend the qualifying offer and he accepts it. And I say that it's not an awful thing because $21 million-ish for Ranger is not the end of the world for one season. It would put you in a little bit of a financial bind unless you were able to trade Taijuan Walker, which would offset some of that money. But right this season, Walker and Sanchez combined are making a little over $26 million. If you're able to trade Taijuan, even if you eat some of the money, and you add it to the 21, you're at about 25, 26 again this year. I think the worst case scenario would be that Ranger accepts the qualifying offer and then you're kicking the can down the road for one season and you're unfortunately going to have to pay, maybe not unfortunately, but you're paying the guy $21 million for 1 year. I think the likeliest scenario would be you offer the qualifying, he signs somewhere else, and you end up getting a comp pick for it.